All right. I think that we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. My name's Alice Morrison. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the two co-directors of Friends of Family Farmers, and you are here with us today for the second in our Lunch and Learn Muckboots in the Capitol series after the 2023 legislative session. And I am going to get our presentation up. Today, we're going to be talking about SB 789 and specialty seed productions in the Willamette Valley, specialty seed protections in the Willamette Valley Protected District. All right, bring up my presentation. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Let me know if you cannot. As I said, this is specialty seed protections from SB 789 that ran in the 2023 legislative session. And this presentation and a recording of today's webinar will be available after this meeting on our website. And for anyone who registered, we'll send them a copy as well. So just to introduce you to Friends of Family Farmers, this is our mission statement. Friends of Family Farmers advances policies and programs that protect, promote, and sustain resilient and economically viable community agricultural systems in Oregon. And we envision a local, diversified, and interconnected agricultural future built by small and mid-sized farms where people, animals, communities, and ecosystems thrive, and equitable policies improve lives and land for all Oregonians. In addition to our advocacy work, we do run 2 farmer resource programs. The Oregon Pasture Network is a community of practice for our pasture-based livestock farmers. Right now, we have about 93 members who cover more than 9,500 acres across Oregon of pasture-based animal agriculture land. And that, if you're a member, you get to list yourself in our pastured producer guide. So if you're out there and you're a consumer like looking for some meat that aligns with your values, check out OregonPastureNetwork.org. You can browse a list of all of our members and their offerings. And you can apply for membership on that website as well. Or if you're not in production yet and you want to get there, we have introduced our Oregon Pasture Education Network, the Open Group, where you can get all of the resources from all of our past classes, access to the forums, pasture walks, all the member benefits without being a full member and in the guide if you're just getting started. So look for education resources and community for pasture-based agriculture over at OPN. We also run Oregon FarmLink, which is a platform for connecting land seekers and land holders and increasing land security for the next generation of farmers and helping people find succession for their farm that aligns with their values. We also provide one-on-one technical assistance for BIPOC and intersectionally underserved farmers through our Navigate program. We also just recently opened a Willamette Valley cohort, South Willamette Valley rather, cohort of land seekers for the second Navigate cohort as well. And we're accepting applications in both of those cohorts. So if you are seeking land and would like some one-on-one land seeker assistance, head on over to OregonFarmLink.org and fill out an application for the Navigate program. But we are here today to talk about advocacy. And the goals in FOF's advocacy are to make sure that the farmers that we represent are heard, seen, and present in Oregon agricultural policy, and that it serves them. And that policy creates an environment where it's possible for our farmers to thrive. We also have a mandate of bringing farmer-driven policy to Salem, and all of the policy that we support comes directly from our biennial farmer focus groups and family farm survey. They give us, our farmers, many of you on this call have filled out the survey or been part of our focus groups. Thank you so much, because that is the pool of ideas and priorities that we use to determine where we direct our efforts. During our legislative session, our engagement with ODA, and how we help make Oregon work for farmers. And then we are also joined today by one of our coalition partners here on the call to talk about the topic of SB 789 and the Willamette Valley Protected District. So I'd love to introduce you to Board President Amy Wong of the Oregon Organic Coalition, and she'll say a few words about the OOC.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. So the Oregon Organic Coalition was founded by organic trade leaders in 2004 to build unified support for organic advocacy. And the OOC has brought together organic farmers, businesses, affiliated organizations, and other stakeholders to provide direction and advocacy and to support efforts that promote and grow organic trade, farming practices in Oregon and beyond. And our vision is a resilient regional food system rooted in organic practices.
Great. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Amy, and thank you for your continued activism on this topic. And we're going to talk a lot about it today. All right. Oops. We wanted to kick off our discussion of specialty seed protections in the Willamette Valley with this wonderful video that the OOC and their website ProtectWhatsGood.com got going. So it'll give you a little overview of the campaign. Right. Oh, wait. Sorry. So as you saw in the video, we are a very special place here in the Willamette Valley, and we're part of a special region of the world actually that can grow brassica seed. And so when we talk about specialty seed here in Oregon, especially brassica seed, we are one of the top producers in the world. And this region grows more than 90% of some varieties of brassica for the world supply, not just 90% of Oregon supply or the country supply, but we are the only place, one of the only places where these things can grow, and where we can be sure that we have the seed purity that we need in order to promise that what you plant is what you get. Also, seed production is an incredibly lucrative aspect of the Willamette Valley specialty farming culture in general. And I wanted to touch on the economic assessment that Amy and the Organic Coalition helped to complete with Highland Economics. And Amy, would you like to talk a little bit about the economic impact of specialty seed production?
Sure. I think that a lot of times in Salem, especially, we have to make arguments to legislators about why something's important, and good or bad economic impacts are often a big piece. So we really wanted to show them what would be lost if the brassica seed industry was negatively impacted by increased canola acreage in the Willamette Valley. And to highlight the differences in what canola is worth as well as what brassica seed is worth. And it basically, one of the key takeaways of the economic assessment, which was done, as Alice said, by Highland Economics, which has been hired by other agricultural groups such as the Farm Bureau, is basically that we couldn't even grow enough canola in the Willamette Valley Protected District to be able to offset the loss of the brassica seed industry. So to me, that really explains why it's so important to keep these protections. And on the other side, you have canola growers saying that, no, it's a very important rotation crop. And I understand that rotation crops are really important. But again, we would need either further economic data to look at what those rotation crops bring. But as some of our legislators have said, we shouldn't be pitting crops against each other in a perfect world. And I think that we've made a really great case that shows how important brassica seed is, not only to the world, but to Oregon's farm economy. And Alice brought up a really great point in that growing seed allows people to scale up on a small amount of land. And when you have a lot of interest in Salem wanting to help farmers and keep farmers on land, seed production is one way that makes that more possible. So another reason why it's interesting to look at the high per acre yield of seed production, especially brassica seed production.
Yeah, I think that's something that there are many farmers in FOF's network and in OOC's network who grow exclusively seed, but there are even more who grow seed as a portion of their business to get that sustainability in cash flow over the year. Because when you take a seed contract, that pays out once a year, usually in the winter, which can help you extend your cash flow through the seasons, help you have a little bit of assurance that you are going to be able to plan for the future of your farm. And as Amy said, this specialty seed contracts, especially organic ones, are a really helpful tool for small acreage farmers to be viable here in Oregon. And it's a really unique way that folks can achieve year-round cash flow and viability on a very small acreage when farming in alignment with their values. And then we have a slide talking about the production of canola here in Oregon. There are 3 protected districts across the state. We're mostly talking about the Willamette Valley Protected District today, but there are other protected districts across the state as well. And outside of those protected districts, there are not restrictions on canola growing. So we're only talking about these places where it has been determined that that canola growing poses a risk to other industries, including specialty seed. Rapeseed or canola, those are the same thing. It has a high probability of crossing with many brassica seed crops. That's what we're here to discuss today. Obviously, there's also been research done on pest and disease control and the blackleg laws and everything like that. But all that notwithstanding, the reason canola is a focus in this work is because of its ability to cross with many brassica seed crops and its fervor in becoming a ditchweed in seed banking, and it's very hard to eradicate. And as Amy alluded in the previous slide, rapeseed and canola only produces a profit of $190 per acre, and that is from the Highland Economics Study. And so this is usually used as a rotation for grass seed farmers, but there are many other oil seed crops that could be a rotation, put into rotation that would, tap into that oil seed market and not pose the risk that canola does to an established industry here in the Willamette Valley Protected District. So there are alternatives is also a case that we always make when we talk about this issue.
Alice, I want to jump in 1 second too and go
Yes.
back quickly. Another big economic piece is that Oregon is in the top 5 for fresh vegetable production, both organic and conventional. And obviously vegetable seed is a key input. So there's a lot of vegetable growers who have long been tracking this issue, back to 2012 when it really started ramping up, that are concerned what would be the economic impact of losing a key regional, local input for their production. And I think that's another economic impact that needs to be taken into account.
Definitely, Amy. Thank you for bringing that up. So we've said the word protected district quite a bit. And what do we mean by that? So there are 3 areas of the state, as I said before, that are considered protected districts. And this is a map. I think Brittany can put the mapping tool from ODA in the chat where you can see the other protected districts as well. But this is a district where it's been determined that back in 2012, when this issue started heating up, that, we needed to protect the specialty seed industry because of this cross-contamination problem. And so this district was established, and the rules were that it limits canola production to 500 acres within this district. And canola growers have to apply for a permit through ODA and pin on the Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association pinning map through that ODA permit process to make sure, you know, that there's no conflicts and that the isolation distances are correct. We're going to talk about pinning a little bit more in depth in just a moment. But when we are referencing the protected district, I know this is pretty zoomed out, but there is a tool that is available on ODA's website, a GIS tool where you can type in your address or the address of a farm and see whether it falls into any of the protected districts. So the pinning map is also a major feature of the current system and a point of contention in the campaign that we're talking about today. So the Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association is a trade association who manages the pinning map for Oregon seed growers in the Valley and in the protected district. This is a very common scenario, and trade associations also, sometimes in collaboration with state government, sometimes not, also manage pinning in Washington and California as well. So we're not out of the ordinary in this situation. All seed growers have to pin their crops to avoid cross-contamination. Canola growers get their pins through the permitting process with ODA. And essentially, the starting isolation distance for crops that have the potential to cross, including all brassicas and with canola in there as well, is that all farmers with conflicting crops within 3 miles of each other have to have a conversation and reach an agreement if a waiver can be granted. Something that is hard when we talk about the campaign, but very, you know, in the nuances of the science of plant biology, is that not all crops are at the same risk of crossing. So when you're talking about brassicas generally, you do have to look at the nuances of like whether brassica A and brassica B have a high chance of being able to cross with each other. And if that's the case, then that 3 mile isolation distance is really, really important to maintain. But there are instances where a waiver can be granted and crops can be planted closer to each other if those plants don't have a very similar biology that would allow them to cross most easily. The thing that I want to point out is that even if there are, you know, biological factors that make them less likely to cross, the danger of crossing is never zero if you're talking about within the same brassica family. So that's something to consider, and why these isolation distances are so important and a science-based approach to them is so important to us in this campaign. So we've talked a little bit around this, but we've come together with a coalition on this issue. Friends of Family Farmers, Oregon Organic Coalition, and the Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association are working together to try to find a solution that really maintains the viability of the specialty brassica seed industry. Because we want to emphasize that the specialty brassica seed farmers are the ones who have things to lose. The canola farmers are not losing anything in the current system. They only stand to gain, and our farmers in the specialty seed industry only stand to lose if canola becomes more popular, not more popular, more prolific in the valley. So we want to protect our farmers' ability to grow viable specialty seed crops in the brassica family. And that's what we've come together in this coalition to do. So I want to hand it to Amy to talk about the bill that we ran in the last session, SB 789, and give a little overview of what happened.
Sure. So the Oregon Organic Coalition worked with the Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association to come up with SB 789. There was also another bill that was introduced in the House. SB 789 was introduced in the Senate. That would have been a ban on canola completely. But most of the energy was really focused on SB 789 because we felt that it was the continuation of the existing policy, which has been working. And we had a good showing in the Senate, and the bill was voted out of the Senate. It came to the House. It ended up in the House Agriculture Committee, of which Rep. Sharf, who is a canola grower, sits on, and it faced more challenges in the House. And we still were able to get it voted to the House Rules Committee. And from there, it was significantly amended at the end of session. And we did not get a lot of input into the amendment. And that's really where we ended up with the sunset of the 500-acre cap being pushed out yet another year. And then the formation of the work group, which is going on right now. We met earlier in the summer, and we're going to be meeting again tomorrow, and then have a TBD meeting in September. And the point of this work group is really to just, how I'm approaching the work group is that I'm looking to create a more complete record of all of the issues that really matter to the brassica seed industry. And the ODA will be putting forth a report to the legislature by the end of September, discussing all of the things that ideally would be considered in legislation in the short session and potentially moving on to the long session. So we are doing our best and are holding this webinar today to make sure we're getting enough input from the seed community to ensure that we're putting together a good record, and that these issues will be taken more seriously when we get back to the legislature. And I think that if you've been following this issue, historically, the legislature had worked with a weed scientist, Dr. Carol Mellor-Smith, to look at some of the impacts of canola in the working with specialty seed. And it really focused on looking at pest and disease pressures, which certainly are issues for all brassica growers, but it did not study cross-contamination. And cross-contamination has always been the key issue for seed growers because seed purity is so important. And the elephant in the room, of course, is that we've heard a lot that canola is no different from any other brassica, but the truth of the matter is that there are GMO or genetically engineered varieties of canola, and that poses a threat to both conventional and especially organic seed growers, because organic, by legal definition, can't have adventitious presence of genetically engineered organisms. So that's where the GE issue also comes up in this debate, and we're hoping to make sure that people understand that it is a legal and economic issue and really highlight that fact.
Yeah, so in advance of, well, based on what we heard in the first meeting of the work group, Amy is a formal member of the work group, as is FOF board member and seed farmer Hank Keogh of Avoca Seeds, and Sarah from Adaptive Seeds, and a OSU scientist named Dr. Jim Myers, who can speak to the cross-contamination issue, as well as many representatives from the canola industry, and a member of the ODA Board of Agriculture who is not familiar with this issue but sits on the Board of Agriculture. So there are a lot of voices in that room, but based on what we heard at the meeting on the 7th and what was requested of us to provide, further feedback for the next meeting, we came up with a list of 3 top priorities that we're hoping that you all on the call today, and, folks listening to the recording, hopefully very soon afterwards, could give us any feedback or raise any questions about, so that we, make sure your voices are heard in this process, even if you weren't asked to sit on the work group. So FOF, OOC, and WVSSA, our top 3 priorities are to ensure that canola restrictions and isolation distances remain intact in the Willamette Valley Protected District. We do need to make sure that there are restrictions within this space and that the pinning and isolation distances are required as they are now. We want to ensure appropriate acreage limitations remain intact. Reasonable increases in acreage or change of the Willamette Valley Protected District boundaries is possible as long as there are, science-based reasons for those and protections in place to make sure that that will not have a negative impact on brassica seed growers. And then, as Amy mentioned, we are hoping to put on the record that GE and GMO canola varieties cannot be grown within the Willamette Valley Protected District if we are going to maintain the viability of the organic brassica seed industry. As I said before, some of these varieties, 90% of the seed for some of these brassica varieties is grown right here in the Willamette Valley. And if there is a high risk of GE contamination from canola that's gone feral, is in ditches, on roadsides, that kind of thing, then that really endangers our farmers' ability to fulfill their contracts. All overseas contracts will probably be canceled. We have a lot of evidence to say that the seed industry at large will not trust brassica seed from our region if there is a proliferation of GE and GMO canola here in the valley. So these are our top 3 suggestions or priorities for future policy on this topic. And now I would love to know, as I said at the beginning, all of you have the ability to unmute yourselves, and you can also type it in the chat if you would like. But what do you think of these 3 things? Do they cause you worry? Do you think, yay, that's great? We would love feedback on either side. I see in the chat some assent to these priorities. Thank you all so much. We want to make sure that we're always gut checking what we want to bring forward on behalf of folks. Right. Any questions on what any of these would mean, or any discussion you'd like to enter into? We could talk about this all day, so give us a direction to run in if you want.
Hey, can I just clarify? So right now with the 500-acre exemption, is GMO canola allowed 100 acres?
So technically right now, there is no restriction on whether or not folks can plant GE canola. They just haven't so far, which there is GE canola in, well, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is GE canola in other parts of the state and grown in the country, obviously. But within the Willamette Valley Protected District, there's nothing that says that they can't do it in the future. And they just haven't used those varieties so far. So we're trying to head that off at the pass and make sure we don't leave the door open for it.
Yeah, further, Alice. So one of the things is that previously there was an oil crushing facility in Rickreall, Oregon, and that was where the canola growers were having their canola pressed. And that facility did not allow GE varieties. However, that facility is now permanently closed and there's no place in Oregon to process canola. So it's trucked out to Warden, Washington, which again, because canola can, the seeds are super tiny, they can escape so easily. Dr. Myers believes that it should only be transported in watertight containers. Anytime you then would be driving canola out of state, it poses additional contamination risks. So right now, previously canola growers were saying that, oh, well, we're not using these varieties because we can't and we don't have to. They said they're seeing the yields that they want without needing to use genetically engineered varieties, but there's no testing that's going on currently. And again, because canola crosses so easily, there very well could be. Some people suspect that there are already there varieties even in the valley, certainly in Oregon. And I think when you look to Canada, where they grow a lot of rapeseed canola, only Prince Edward Island, an island. That's the only place where organic corn canola can be grown, again, because of that easy outcrossing problem. So this is something that is really important, especially to organic growers. But I know that conventional growers are concerned about contamination, especially ones that sell into markets like Japan.
Yeah, that's a good point, that there are markets that restrict the use of GE and GMO canola, well, crops in general, that are not organic. There are just, FOF usually tends to focus on domestic markets, and this is one of the only times that we, as an organization, are thinking about, oh, well, what about the international markets that some of these specialty seeds are going to? I see a question in the chat from Teresa. Does ODA restrict GMO crops already? No. So my understanding, and Amy will definitely be able to say more about this, but right now there is a law on the books that ODA and that the state cannot interfere with some things like GE and GMO, whether or not they're legal, because of the outcry after the ban down in Southern Oregon. I believe that was Josephine County, that still has a ban on all GE and GMO crops, and they are allowed to keep their ban, but there was a law afterwards that said that you can't all and out make them illegal. Amy, am I representing that correctly?
So it's actually Jackson County. So what happened was Jackson County and Josephine County, two counties in Southern Oregon, where there's also seed production, and there was threats to beta seed from genetically engineered crops, and farmers had to rip out their crops so that they weren't contaminated. And so both Jackson and Josephine counties put ballot initiatives on the record to ban the cultivation of GE crops in those counties. At that point in time, larger forces came to Salem, and during a special session in 2013, put on the books a seed preemption law. It exempted Jackson County only because Jackson County had already filed their paperwork to run the ballot initiative. Josephine County had not yet, but had plans to do so. So that was enacted as part of a grand deal over PERS, I believe, and it passed. And again, in a special session with very little public input, the seed preemption bill passed. And basically it says that no county except Jackson County can pass laws dictating things like a ban on GE varieties. So both Jackson and Josephine County ballot initiatives were successful. Jackson's was allowed to stand and is still in place today, but Josephine County voters were disenfranchised because even though they voted to ban GMO crops, they weren't included. They weren't called out as being exempt from now the statewide preemption. So I think it's an interesting legal question to look at. Well, we know counties can't do that, but it would be interesting to see what the state can do.
Yeah, it's definitely a multifaceted issue. And we are prepared to have those hard conversations as we move forward in this campaign. So, with your blessing, we are going to move forward with the conversation tomorrow in Salem with the work group, and putting forward, what we feel are the most important points. And I think we touched on this before in the previous slide, but the work group, its report is not intended to be a legislative concept. It is not intended to just spit out something that lawmakers can then file and turn into a bill. We have been told several times by ODA that they are just there to gather the information and present options to the legislature for lawmakers who perhaps don't have a lot of personal experience on this topic, or are not as connected to the folks on the ground who are being impacted by this, to have some options to consider when bringing this up. So the work group and the report will not be 100% what we want or 100% what the other folks want. And we will likely have to, you know, take this into our advocacy hands at OOC, at the Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association, and at FOF to continue to educate legislators on which parts of the report, or if there are things missing from the report, educate them on how this nuanced issue and how this it's a very niche issue, but it's so important, and how we would like the future of specialty seed production to be protected. So there will be more to do after this report comes out. And that leads me to how to get involved. So like all work groups, there will be a draft report coming out before it's finalized and sent to the legislature. And usually these reports do have some type of public comment available, or if they choose not to do that, I'm not sure if it's legally required or like it is with the rulemaking process. But we will provide you ample opportunities to make your opinion of the draft report known. And so make sure to head on over to the FOF website, sign up for our email list, or go to ProtectWhatsGood.com, which is the campaign website for protecting specialty seed, to get notifications and our analysis of materials that come out. Like we said in the previous slide, this report is required to be delivered to the legislature by the end of September, and it will be discussed during some meetings that are set in what they call legislative days, which is a group of days that we have, one scheduled for September and one scheduled for November, where legislators gather in Salem to discuss certain topics outside of a regular scheduled session. So there won't be any like voting on things or final decisions made, but there are educational presentations, and this is where a lot of the policy formation comes together. So there will be presentations on this report at the September legislative days. And we will also be meeting with folks and talking about how you, as farmers, as the public, feel about what's being presented. And then we will also have opportunities for you to contact your legislator. If you have a relationship with your legislator currently, if you are already active in that way and want to write to them or call them, obviously they're not going to be in their office in Salem every day this time of year because the session's not active. But if you want to send some notes to their staff or leave messages for them that say, hey, the Willamette Valley Protected District is really important to me, and we want to protect specialty seed production for farmers, for ecosystems, and for the world's food supply, we highly encourage you to do so and have some templates you can work from. And if you are a brassica or a seed farmer, you can contact info@friendsofamilyfarmers.org to talk about the possibility of meeting with your legislator or bringing them out to your farm. We have quite a few already on the books, but if this is something you're really passionate about and you want legislators at your farm to hear your issues, we will work with you to make that happen however it can. So yeah, I'm seeing some things in the chat.
Alice, I just want to add too,
Yeah.
we, in terms of the history of 789 last session, a lot of energy was spent in the Senate, and we have good support for seed protections there. We even had bipartisan support at the beginning. We had a Republican sign on to our Senate bill. In the House, we had a lot of challenges in that there were so many new members. So we really are going to be needing to lean on constituents and people who care about this issue to be contacting their House representatives, especially. That's where we have the biggest lift. We have a lot of education to do in the House. We had people on the House Ag Committee who had never even heard of this issue, and then were voting on it, a week later, and were taking strong positions on it that we didn't think fully understood the seed perspective. So a lot of education is needed in the House, and the best way to do that is through constituent outreach. And I see that Someone asked, why can't the coalition just do another bill and ban it and be done? And, you know, one of the challenges of this is that Rep. Scharf is a canola grower, sits on the House Ag Committee, and is really dedicated to ideally getting more canola in the Valley. And it's a really difficult environment to be working in. The legislature really wants there to be some sort of compromise. So if we continue to push for a full out ban, I think this issue will just keep getting drawn out because the canola industry will continue to come back and be wanting more canola. So we're trying to find a way that there's a happy medium. And some of the things that we didn't discuss that are also important to the coalition is having some sort of scientific research-based ground truthing of what has happened to the Willamette Valley in the last 10 years of allowing canola there. The seed producers are saying that there's problems, and we would like to make sure that there's some sort of official accounting of that and making sure that there's checks and balances. Even on if it's only 500 acres allowed moving forward, there still needs to be a way to pump the brakes if that's becoming too much and is threatening the seed industry. And if it was to be increased at all, there would also need to be a very significant series of checks and balances. And then there's things that we know both sides really want. We'd love to see the state take a more active role in managing feral canola populations, managing feral weeds, because that's where you can get back crossing and additional pest and disease pressures. So there's places where we really do hope to work together, and there's places where we need to hold the line. And so that's just a sad reality of working in Salem. A lot of times compromise is what is necessary. And so we're really hoping that we truly can get there and that we can slightly shift the narrative away from just pest and disease and get more scientific documentation on the record about cross-contamination. And we're really grateful that Dr. Jim Myers, who is an amazing plant breeder and has deep expertise with this, get his voice as elevated as Dr. Carol Mallory Smith's voice.
Yeah, thank you so much for that nuance, Amy. And I agree. I really wish that we didn't, have to play the game, but we have to work within what we think is possible. And I would love for us to be able to take hard lines on absolutely everything, but yeah, we have to work together to get the things that we want. And we're very, very focused on making sure that there is, as Amy said, ways to pump the brakes and true accountability built into a system that would allow any expanded production, so that we can bring ourselves back if we get to the brink. Yeah. And so we've had several questions throughout the meeting, but I just wanted to, before we close, we're getting almost to time here, and I wanted to give the opportunity for anyone to ask any questions that are still lingering for you, anything you want us to address before we go into this working group meeting tomorrow. Jennifer, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm not a farmer. I'm a consumer, I guess you would say. But I think you might find friends in consumer groups too, to help with this issue. And I'm gonna send an email to the info at Friends of Family Farmers address to get information that I can share with my legislators in Salem, House District 20, which is Paul Evans next to Anna Scharf's District 21, and Senator Deb Patterson. I think she would be really interested in this too. She's not on agriculture, but she's an excellent representative. So Just, yeah.
She actually signed on to the Senate version. So she is a big supporter
Oh,
of this.
excellent.
And actually, excellent that you mentioned Rep. Evans, because I've really been trying to get Rep. Evans more engaged in this issue. So really need some constituent support there as well. And, you know,
Great.
every legislator is different. They have their main issues that of course they're going to be
Yes.
working on most, but this is one
Yeah.
that he hasn't quite embraced as much as I would like Rep. Evans to do so. So if that's
Yeah.
something we could work with you on, that would be fantastic. It's really important that Rep. Evans take up this issue.
Thank you so much for being here. And I'm really glad that we were able to make that connection, Jennifer. And I think that we definitely have ways for all folks, not just farmers, to be involved. And you make a really good point that, you know, there are a lot of consumers who are really concerned about this, and people who love and appreciate the local food system, including local inputs like local seed, and who want to see, you know, fresh vegetable production that's enabled by seed production to continue across the world, obviously. So I think that that's a really important thing to note as we almost come to a close of this, is that there is a place for everyone in this advocacy, and not being a seed farmer shouldn't dissuade you from talking to your representative. We are more than happy to give you whatever facts and figures and tools would be necessary for you to have that conversation. And also, if you have maybe never spoken to your representative before and want some help getting scheduled or talking to them and their staff, that's also something that we can help you with. If you send an email to the info@friendsoffamilyfarmers.org account, we can help you figure out how to get onto their calendar, so to speak. And that's also a service we provide.
I also dropped my email into the chat. Feel free to reach out at any time with any questions or anything as well.
Great. And we would be remiss without saying that Friends of Family Farmers is a 501c3 nonprofit. We work to help support this work as well as our farmer technical assistance, and especially our advocacy work is primarily funded by donations from folks like you who care about and are impacted by our advocacy, because this is not something that government grants or most private foundations, they don't want to change the status quo as much as some of the folks that we work with. So if you really appreciate and love this work, we urge you to make a donation to Friends of Family Farmers to keep us in the room and keep us present in all of the various places where decisions are made. And thank you all so much. That's the end of our presentation today. I hope you were able to eat some lunch and do some learning. And we will have another Lunch and Learn next month. Brittany, what's the topic of our Lunch and Learn next month? Is it SB 85?
Yes.
Yes, we will be discussing SB 85 and factory farm legislation in our Lunch and Learn on the last Monday of the month at noon. We'll be discussing SB 85 next month. So hope to see you there, and